I'm happy to introduce Kit Mars. He's the CEO of Western Alaska Minerals, a company with about 120 million Canadian dollars in market cap, exploring for 5 different metals in 1 major district. So, Kit, I'm really excited to hear your presentation, and here's the clicker pointy thingy, and please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Kai. Well, thank you all for being here today, and first I would like to thank Willem and his team at Commodity Discovery Fund for not only inviting us, but putting on this event. It's a very special to us, so thank you, Willem. So, before I get into the presentation, Willem asked me to discuss just for a few minutes our view of the valuation of Western Alaska Minerals. Valuation of small companies such as ours can be very difficult. So as we go through the presentation, we'll be talking about the mineralized material that we discovered in 2022, last year. And so quickly, it's approximately 3 million tons. You multiply a specific gravity of 3.5, and that's how you arrive at the 3 million tons. And our grade, if you combine the lead, zinc, and the silver, is approximately 25 ounces per ton silver equivalent. Multiply that out, and we discovered approximately 75 million ounces of silver last year. How do you get the final value? That's really up to the market, but in the neighborhood of $2 to $3 an ounce of silver in the ground is a common yardstick. That value increases as we have more and more drilling. So if you take that number and also add the gold resource that we'll talk about briefly during the presentation, that gives a market value of somewhere in the neighborhood of between 150 and 250 million, depending on what values you use. So the other takeaway that we'll talk about today is our deposit, Waterpump Creek. It's what's called a carbonate replacement deposit. That just means the mineralization is hosted by carbonate rocks, limestone, in this case, a dolomite. It's very well known, but less common today type of deposit that was mined in the United States 100 years ago around all the major copper deposits. So most of these deposits are long gone, except in a few areas you'll hear about today, and one is Alaska. So with that, I'd like to go to the cover slide. This gives you an idea of what the area of Alaska looks like that we work in far western Alaska. Low rolling hills. We're not in the Alaska range, so this is a very easy type of terrain to build roads to operate in. Our airstrip is shown in the upper left. That is our normal access other than by winter road. 4,500 feet long. We use that for weekly supply flights and heavy equipment flights. Usual to most exploration projects, this area hosts a past-producing gold mine, the Illinois Creek Mine, and the camp you see in the foreground was previously used when the mine was in year-round operation. So we have some very good infrastructure. The other thing you might notice is that everything is very green, so there's very few rock outcrops, so we have to rely on geology, geophysics, geochemistry, and ultimately drilling to make discoveries. We'll pass by this quickly. So the opportunity we'll talk about today, as I said, is a carbonate replacement deposit. What makes these deposits very unique is, number one, the very, very high grade. So this is a silver-lead-zinc deposit. Approximately 40 to 50% of the value is in the silver, and the rest is split equally between the lead and the zinc. What makes these deposits unique is that you are either in very high-grade mineralization such as this, or you're in white, unmineralized dolomite. There's very little in between. Very easy for a geologist looking at the drill core to say, this is high-grade mineralization. A few examples that are shown there, and see if I can get the pointer to work. There it is. This mineral right here is galena, but in this case it's called argentiferous galena, silver-rich galena. All the silver is contained within that mineral, and it makes it very unique. This ribbon-like texture is very, very unusual, almost a museum quality. So Again, these are just examples of what the mineralization looks like, and again, very unique to this style of deposit. So today we'll be talking about a number of important points. Number one, we have a very unique land position, 100% owned by the company, no other competitors. We have a very, very good exploration team, and that's really key to success in this type of an operation. Myself, I'm trained as an economic geologist a few years ago from the University of Arizona in Tucson, where we have our winter business office. The other parts of our team we'll touch in a minute, but principally Joe Pekenbrock, our Chief Exploration Officer. Between Joe and I, we have 75 years plus exploration history of success in Alaska. We'll be talking about our discovery at Waterpump Creek, and I've mentioned already that it's extremely high grade to bonanza grade. Multiple targets, which we'll also talk about in the potential. To locate, we are up here in western Alaska. This slide just shows that we have deep water barge access from the Pacific Northwest to our location, and up to the mouth of the Yukon River, which is down here. We're about 130 miles inland. And so in this case, the river is our marine highway. In a country like the Netherlands and in Amsterdam, everybody in this room very well knows how important waterways are for moving freight. So that is the key to this project. And doesn't seem to be advancing here, so there we go. Some of the infrastructure I mentioned, the Yukon River is shown on the lower left. We use C-130 Hercules aircraft, heavy lift, for bringing in things like drills. Older DC-6 aircraft is shown there, and this is an aerial view of the airstrip. I'd like to just point out Waterpump Creek, our flagship deposit, is actually about 2 kilometers off the north end of the airstrip. We'll mention the targets for 2023, last draw area, and that would actually be trending right along in this area. I'd like to talk about our local hire initiative, which is very important for an ultimate successful operation really throughout the world, but especially in Alaska. We work very closely with the 3 closest native Alaska villages of Nulato, Kaltag, and Galena. Last year, we had 15 different local hires from the region, and our local hire payroll was over $275 million US. Very significant to the economy of the area. When the Illinois Creek mine was in production in the past, it was the only, and after it's closed, there's been no other major private employer in the area in the last 15 years. I'd like to talk about our stock chart a little bit, since we're here to learn about investing in discovery. Our chart here is an example of what happens when you make a discovery. We went public in 2021 in November at 85 cents a share in the lower left. Continued along, gradually trending upward, completed a private placement financing in May at the price of around $1.20. When we started out, we had a market capitalization of about $30 million. That rose to about $50 million during that financing. The financing funded our 2022 drilling program, which started about right in here. We drilled some excellent intercepts, holes 17 and 18, 47 and 100 meters in thickness. Very, very unusual. Hole 18 was one of the best silver intercepts in the Western Hemisphere last year. So what happens when you make that type of discovery? Well, we're a thinly traded stock, and obviously there was a lot of exuberance in the market. We tripled within a period of a month or less, and then gradually sold off a little bit when some of the shares became free trading, and ended the year at about $3.30. And that is approximately about a 380% increase. Market capitalization shown here. The key takeaway is we have approximately 46 million shares issued, including options, gives us a market capitalization of approximately 145 million. We have participation by 4 well-known institutional investors. Number one, of course, would be the Commodity Discovery Fund. Also Crescat Capital out of Denver, Delbrook Capital out of Vancouver, and one of the Sprott investment funds out of California. Our coverage is shown here in the left. Moving along to the next slide. A little bit of comment on the discovery. So conversations with Willem, I gave him the history of the project, and his comment was, and I think it was very well taken, that after 40 years of very hard work, in 2022, we had a overnight discovery. So that's sort of the way it works in the exploration business. All of the properties that we now own and control were originally discovered by Anaconda Copper Company in 1980 through 84. The Round Top Copper Deposit, Illinois Creek, and just the start of exploration at Waterpump Creek. Just as a little bit of interest, some of the early slides in the 1980s, before there was a larger camp, shown here in the left. The first equipment was brought in a C-130 Hercules on the Yukon River, just was bladed down to the ice and flown in. On the left here is the example or an aerial view of the past producing mine, Illinois Creek. And just wanted to point out, when we went public, our resource of going public was this gold number down here, a little over 500,000 ounces of gold. That was pre-discovery of the Waterpump Creek deposit. Waterpump Creek is so high grade, we instantly changed and pivoted to focus on it. Also, we have a copper deposit, Round Top, which is shown up in here, has some very good value. We focused on Round Top in the 2016 to 19 timeframe, and as copper prices and the demand for copper comes back, this is a sleeping asset that the company has. Key takeaway from the Illinois Creek mine is this shows you can have a fully permitted, fully operational open pit mine in this part of Alaska on our property. So it's a major de-risking element to our company. What is important in discovery? Well, really one of the most important things is the people. So we have an excellent team. I mentioned Joe Pekenbrock, our Chief Exploration Officer, has won awards for a number of discoveries from Canadian mining institutions. One was the Donlin property, which is about 120 miles south of us, and it is the largest undeveloped gold resource in the Western Hemisphere now, approximately 40 million ounces. But we have a very complete team besides those two. We've hired a new geophysicist, Brock Bolin, after a 17-year career with Newmont, including 5 years as their global chief geophysicist, has joined us, and he will be a very important component in our exploration program this summer. So some of the early days of exploration, just want to touch on those. This is an example of the Waterpump Creek area pre-discovery. The way these deposits are discovered, a little bit of history. First is what's called stream sediment sampling. Samples are taken of the sediment, analyzed for metals. It's a long process. It takes several years of sampling, follow-up, sampling again, and follow-up. But this is how the Waterpump Creek area was first defined. Mentioned the high-grade examples, and so that really leads to what is the opportunity at Waterpump Creek, and that is to expand what we know as what we believe is just the first little bit of a long finger of mineralization that's very common in this style of deposit. So we've discovered 3 million tons in 1 year. We hope to double or triple that in 2023. Ultimately, this type of deposit worldwide is in the 10 to 30 or as much as 50 million tons, such as the Santa Eulalia deposit in Chihuahua. So I mentioned that deposit. One of our advisors, Peter McGaw, is well known to the Commodity Discovery Fund Group. Peter was the co-founder of Mag Silver, one of the most important discovery stories of a decade ago, and he is known as the world's renowned expert on carbonate replacement deposits. Also on our advisory team is Darwin Green, who will be presenting a little later today. He is the CEO of High Gold and has helped quite a bit in public markets advice and exploration strategy. So I'd like to just expand on the history a little bit. Our company was actually founded by my wife, Joan, and I. Joan is in the front row here, along with Vanessa Bogart, our corporate communications specialist. So we acquired the properties by actually staking the claims that were in the public domain. We incorporated in 2010 and then explored the district as a private company for the next 10, 11 years. At that point, we decided it was time to go public so we could access the public markets for capital in order to expand our exploration program and take the discovery as fast as we can, and that is the current goal. Whoop. These seem to be a little bit out of order from what I was used to. This just shows some of the early days of soil sampling and exploration in the discovery process. This is in the 1980s. Again, this is before the heavy equipment and road. This is a very small helicopter portable backhoe that's used for trenching to find some of the mineralization. And some of the examples, again, of how this discovery is done. Area totally covered, no rock exposures. Everything is done by geochemistry and science of follow-up. And these are in a very different order. On the right is an example of the Illinois Creek discovery. This is a iron oxide gossan. It was during the follow-up of the stream sediment samples, a geologist using a helicopter landed on this area. It was open, one of the few landing zones in the area, and that became the past-produced, the Illinois Creek oxide gold mine that I showed earlier. On the left, sort of a interesting slide. This was before we had any heavy equipment and actually used a helicopter to sling the roof trusses up in a building that we were putting up for the geology office. Mentioned the past producing mine. This just is shown in 1996, an example of you can build a gold mine in this area. The key takeaway is just don't go into production at the all-time low of the gold market. In 1997, gold was $270 an ounce. The project went quickly into a negative cash flow and closed after 18 months. But they did produce some gold, as shown here, these doré of gold and silver. Modern exploration is really the change. So after 20, 30 years from the original discovery, we started working in 2020 and 2021. This is one of our geologists, young lady Sage Langston Stewart, who just graduated from Colorado School of Mines a few years ago, and she is now the lead geologist on the Waterpump Creek project. This is an example in 2021 of our sort of rediscovery hole. Again, an example of the extremely high-grade mineralization. Dr. Peter McGaw is shown here on the left. He was on site giving a short course to our technical team the day we drilled into this mineralization, and that really forged Peter's decision to become part of our team. The grade is shown here. I won't go through all the numbers, but this is an example of what sets this deposit apart from others. 0.5 kilo of silver per ton and almost 46% combined lead zinc. So with this type of high grade, you end up with a very small footprint type of deposit, so a very low surface impact from an environmental standpoint, and from an economic standpoint, a very small capital cost to put in production. And it's also an example of a recent discovery in 2019 south of Tucson, the Taylor deposit, Taylor Sunnyside. This 3 years after discovery the company was purchased by South 32 out of Australia for $1.8 billion in cash. And that's an example of the economic leverage this type of deposit can provide. This just shows, again, what we accomplished. Some of the early days of exploration were up here in the oxide area. The 2109 drill hole that changed the focus of our company is right here. And the important takeaway is that last year's drilling extended the mineralization down dip to the south. Gradually, it's about a 15-degree decline or dip. And it's just an example. It shows the tremendous amount of mineralization that we discovered in 1 year of drilling. And as you can see on the upper right-hand It is open going down dip and actually gaining in thickness. So what will we be doing in 2023? The drilling will be two-focused. First of all, we'll have 2 drill rigs that are currently on site. We own our equipment, and so it's ready to go. We'll be starting our drill program May 15th to May 20th. 1 drill rig will be filling in some of the spacing at Waterpump Creek, and the second one will be continuing on to the south to extend the mineralization that I talked about. If we can achieve additional financing this summer, a 3rd drill rig would work on some of the exploration targeting as shown here, and I'll touch on those in a few minutes. Because of time, I won't go through all the rest, but we've completed civil engineering for our road access study. Our metallurgy, which is very important, is ongoing and should be completed in the next month or 2. But this style of deposit, because of the very coarse-grained nature of the mineralization, historically has very, very high recoveries in the plus 90% range. Some of the modern techniques I just want to mention quickly. In the early discovery days, everything was hand-drawn, pre-computer. It takes a lot of work and a lot of training, years of training for a geologist to learn how to think in 3 dimensions. One of the changes of modern exploration, now we're in the computer age, is 3D graphics, and this is an example of a 3-dimensional computer-generated shape for the mineralization, the 3 million tons I mentioned that we discovered last year, and this is how modern resources are defined. These ellipses show targeting that we'll work on this year. The 75 million ounce estimated, and I should say a couple times, we do not have a current resource. This is a geologic estimate of the tons and grade, but any mining analyst would be able to take this information and come up with their own estimate. That little red chili pepper I just showed you in the previous is this area right in here. The purpose of this slide is to show in blue represents a geophysical anomaly that was put together and designed, or not designed, but revealed by Brock Boleen, our geophysicist. This just occurred in February of this year. And in addition, this was a reinterpretation and modeling of data acquired in 2005. This is old 2-dimensional data, and with his skill, created a 3-dimensional model. That 3-dimensional model shows an additional 1.4 kilometer target area. That will be one of the main focus of our drilling this summer, and that would give us the ability, if the mineralization continues to the south, and this geophysical anomaly tells us that it indeed does, we could double or triple the amount of contained silver that we've discovered in 2022. This target area that I just mentioned is shown here in brown, and to show the scale of the area, the Illinois Creek mine that I showed earlier is shown right here, 1 kilometer bar, so we have a 6 to 8 kilometers of distance between the two, and this is part of one big geologic carbonate replacement system. So there is a tremendous potential of targeting in the future. This type of exploration takes money, takes capital, and so that is really the key to how fast you can move and increase your rate of discovery. Again, our targeting, in this case shown in this light purple, the discovery of last year is this little area here. So it just gives you an example of the tremendous size of the potential going south along the Waterpump Creek structure. A newly defined Warm Springs target defined by our geophysical analysis is shown in here, and additional targets here, and a porphyry target that is common in this style of carbonate replacement mineralization down in this area. So tremendous amount of targets that have yet to be tested. All of these have the potential for new major discoveries that would take us to that Tier 1 discovery that Willem talked about earlier. And we've covered that, and it seems like the slide deck is going backwards. We'll see if this one works. This would be right on the last slides. It's just an example of two of our geologists, the people involved, and really I want to convey the excitement that they have working on this type of deposit, something that is only happens hopefully at least once in the career of a geologist, to be part of a major discovery such as this. It's a very rare event, and I spent a lot of time explaining to the young geologists, this doesn't happen very often, so please enjoy your time working on this. And again, it's a combination of hard work, of science, patience, and motivation and belief in the discovery. So the discovery process is really something that we've been working on and believe in for the last 40 years, and it's really the definition of Willem's group here, the Discovery Fund. And it's really the ability to find something that other people can't see, and ultimately with a lot of hard work you can do that. So with that, thank you very much, and if we have any time, we'll take a question.